Every time I play catch with my son, like I never say no. Anytime they want to play catch, anytime they want to tickle in the basement, anytime he wants me to, lie with him at the end of the day because, he wants some company falling asleep. Like there's maybe some days before where I would say tomorrow, but I don't say tomorrow anymore.
This is TSN In Depth. I'm Rick Westhead, joined today by Jermain Franklin with TSN and Chris Snow, Assistant General Manager with the Calgary Flames. Chris, do you mind walking us through how you found out that you had ALS, what was going on last year?
Sure. Last spring, working out one day in the playoffs in Denver, I just didn't have the normal kind of strength I would expect in the outer half of my dominant hand. And after the playoffs were over, I began to go to see specialists who would do an ultrasound, an MRI, kind of checking down the list of, is this a pinched nerve somewhere? And each time those results came back unremarkable, my level of concern went up, and this began to point toward a motor neuron disease. And finally, in mid-June last year, a specialist in Calgary said to me that that's what he thought it was.
Chris, what was the first thing, I guess, that went through your mind when you heard the news and it was confirmed that it was ALS?
Yeah, the first thing that through my mind is that this is a death sentence. In the case of the specific genetic cause that I have, it's basically a 1-year life expectancy, give or take. My dad and both of his brothers lived about 9 months from diagnosis until they passed away. My cousin was about 1.5 years. So it was really just, staring into this place where you see no future at that point.
When someone gives you news like that, Chris, that they think that you're looking at 1 year to live, do you spend more time with family than you might? Are you less obsessed about, being invested in work? How does it change you?
Yeah, I think, well, in the immediate week after, we called the University of Miami. And there's a doctor there, Michael Benatar, who has been studying ALS, studying familial causes of ALS for, I think, at least a couple of decades. And they basically said, we can see you in 6 days for a research visit or in a month or 2 months. And we said, we'll take the 6 days. And those 6 days in between, I went to work earlier and I left about 2:30 each of those days to get home in time to get on my bike with my wife on hers and my daughter on hers and go to my son's school. And you get out at 3:10, we'd pick them up and bike ride, go to the park. And when the kids weren't looking at us at the park, we were in tears. And when they were looking at us, we were, trying to give them what they needed. And then come the kids' bedtime at 7, 8 o'clock, those became, very emotional times at night where you talk about the worst of what could happen and you cry a lot.
All those little moments, Chris, that we take for granted, over the last couple of months, is there anything in the course of your day that you now, really hold on to and try to focus on?
Yeah, I think it's easy. I think that the only time, I'm not good at it is a little bit of, anger can creep in because, you're saying this shouldn't be happening again in our family. This should not be happening to, my family to have to, potentially go through this getting worse for me. But I think every time I play catch with my son, like I never say no. Anytime they want to play catch, anytime they want to tickle in the basement, anytime he wants me to, lie with him at the end of the day because, he wants some company falling asleep. Like there's maybe some days before where I would say tomorrow, but I don't say tomorrow anymore.
When you went to Miami, what was the news that you received, and why did hope return?
Sure. Yeah, that was a difficult trip. We flew on Father's Day. I remember in the morning they put me through a number of research type tests, and we sat outside. It was for lunch. It was pouring out. My wife had no appetite. We were both crying, and I remember her just saying over and over, "We need a miracle." And we went in, and it took a while. It took about an hour and a half for him to conclusively say, "I think this is the beginning of ALS." And I said, "What do I do?" And he just looked at me and he said two things. He said, one, you do what brings you joy, and two, you have to join this clinical trial. And it is the first ALS clinical trial to get to a phase 3, which is the last phase before a drug is hopefully ideally approved. That is a gene therapy that goes in there and effectively silences or reduces the effects of what the bad gene that has mutated is doing. And so we walked out of there. We felt buoyed, like we had a chance that my family didn't have. That 98% of people with ALS don't have, because there isn't a therapy that is this far advanced.
Chris, can you take us a little bit through the clinical trial? I know that you were traveling and you mentioned that you're now getting treated here in the foothills, but what was it like, especially with the pandemic and what is going on in these last few months?
So the routine was basically Wednesday afternoon, get on a plane, Thursday morning, go to the hospital. And I would always go into those with anxiety because I didn't want to observe or be told of any change. And I think as the months went along in the fall, I started to realize that I was the same. I had been told that by September, October, I would not be able to lift my right arm over my head, and that never happened. So those were going in anxious, and then I get the dose in the afternoon, and then walking out of that hospital. I would also say just to walk that hallway was the best feeling, because I honestly expected going into the trial that I might be pushed down that hallway at some point in a wheelchair. And so when the pandemic came along, the people at the University of Calgary, in conjunction with Foothills and South Health, a woman named Janet Petrillo and then Dr. Lawrence Corngut, the work they did to expedite and make happen that transfer was remarkable. Like, I don't even probably understand the full scope of it. I went to Toronto March 31st, and come my next dose, end of April, start of May, I was going 2 kilometers out my window here. I could walk, I could ride a bike.
In a lot of houses, Chris, people are taking precautions, wiping groceries down, being careful about contact with people outside the home. What's it like inside your home?
Yeah, my wife is the one who goes out. She's nervous about me getting sick. I have a strong immune system. My breathing is not compromised. And so I think the risk at this moment in time for me is if I did get sick, then I might not be able to get that scheduled dose on time until I was healthy again. And really, I don't go anywhere because there just doesn't seem to be any need to, risk some exposure.
How, I guess when you don't go out, that's one way of dealing with it. Is it still a little bit nerve-wracking knowing that obviously you have one of those underlying health issues that could be detrimental?
Yeah, it probably is. I think that, what I've learned is there's things you can control and there's an awful lot that you can't. And so we've identified the things within our control, which is if we have a get together with friends, it's one friend in the yard from a safe distance, or it's over a Zoom type setting where we get a group of friends together on a Friday or Saturday night. So I think we just have tried to, put every odd in our corner to keep ourselves safe, and knock on wood, it's been effective so far.
Chris, there's been a lot of chatter about the NHL trying to pick up and resume the season, and we've heard about hub cities and the potential. Is it safe to say that you won't be going anywhere? You would not be going outside your home no matter which way the NHL season winds up?
Yeah, my wife would say 100%. I have a feeling that if that happens, that the decision won't even be there to make, that there'll be a finite and limited number of staff members. So if that happens, I would probably expect that our general manager is there, and then after him, the rest of the front office wouldn't be. But yeah, if given the option and I say I want to go, that's going to be a big argument downstairs.
As somebody who's spent a lot of time in hospitals over the last year, you would have come to understand the strain on resources that the pandemic now is causing. And I wonder what goes through your mind when you see people protesting lockdowns and, the mandatory guidelines for wearing masks?
Yeah, and I think that we all just need to apply, a little common sense, that wearing a mask is probably going to help. When I went into that hospital in Toronto for the last time, which was the first time I went there since, most of the country had shut down, I saw the measures that those people were taking to keep me safe and to keep themselves safe. And I just think we all have a responsibility to do that until, we're told otherwise.
Chris, roughly 5,000 people each year are diagnosed with ALS in the United States, from the statistics I've seen. What would your advice be to someone coming out of a doctor's office having just received that diagnosis?
Well, I think that, every passing day, thanks to all of the money raised due to the Ice Bucket Challenge and science just beginning to catch up with this disease, every passing day, there's an increasing likelihood that there's going to be something there to help these people that wasn't there before. My hope and expectation is that, in my lifetime, there is a cure. There is a way to significantly slow this for those whose cause is unknown and there isn't a cure. And that's why the fundraising that we're trying to do is so important. It's important to provide resources for people who are sick, but I believe the most important thing is to provide future hope for people who are sick or may get sick, which is why everything we're doing will be funneled directly to research into finding a cure.
And just as an extension to your answer there, Chris, can you talk a little bit about why it's so important for you to share your story?
Yeah, I think a few reasons. I think that I didn't do anything, real tangible to honor, the family members that I've lost in the way of fundraising, in the way of awareness. So that's important. I think it's important that I use the platform I have. Not everybody has reached to a large audience, and the fact that we're sitting here doing this demonstrates that I have that. And I think that that's an opportunity that I can't pass up. And then the last part is, I think that, regardless of how this goes for me, I think it's a great teaching moment for my wife and myself with our kids. We want them to be able to retrace this journey we took, and to be proud of the fact that, in the face of this, we were optimistic, and we tried to help not only our own cause, but the cause of people facing the same thing.
Chris, how much thought have you put into the kind of conversations you might have with your son in coming months or hopefully years?
Mm-hmm.
This is a disease, as you pointed out, that's hereditary, so it'd be understandable for him to be scared as he understands that more.
Yeah, that was a thought process I had far more back in June, back in July. The biggest concern I had was, having to tell the kids a story that didn't have a good ending, to have them worry and be anxious and sad. And I think that the advice you often get, I think, in times like this is to tell your kids what they need to know and to answer their questions honestly, but to not tell them more than they need to know, while not being dishonest. Because they have seen me do everything I did with them before. I play street hockey with my son, and I have an adaptation for my right hand that allows me to grip the stick. I helped coach my son's hockey team all year because our equipment manager adapted my hockey glove. I've learned to throw right-handed and can still throw left-handed and can still throw him batting practice. So he's seen no change in me. Every night, he prays that my arm gets better and my hand gets better. And I tell him, I don't really need it. All I need is to stay the same. And so I have a lot more confidence today that this is not going to be a problem for him than before I walked into Dr. Benatar's office and Dr. Zimmerman's office and went into this trial. So I think, at each step, I'll answer his questions, and, my health will dictate those answers. And my hope remains that the answers are are as positive as they are today, and if they aren't, then we'll have to deal with that, as it comes along.